John the Baptist, the period of retirement, and then we have this, the imprisonment of John the Baptist, period of retirement, and we have the close of Jesus' ministry, in which we have our Lord from the Feast of Tabernacles, and John really is the one who spends a lot of time in this. John chapter 7 and verse 2, we have the Feast of Tabernacles. This is the fall of the year, and the Lord will be crucified in the spring. So keep this in mind. This is the last 6 months or so of Jesus' work on the earth. And you can see how much of the book of John is taken up with it. So we've been studying mostly in John this quarter so far. And we read about Jesus coming to Jerusalem after what seemed like quite an absence. He had been staying away from Jerusalem, teaching in Galilee. I think that was all with purpose, because he knows that the opposition is gathering steam, and he realizes also the timing of this matter, and so he will not allow himself to be taken until the time is right. But we've been looking at Jesus' work during this feast, about his teaching in the temple and teaching after the feast. And last time we were together, we looked at John 8 and noticing Jesus teaching again in the temple, in the treasury of the temple, and his encounter with his enemies has become very sharp and pointed. They are greatly proud of their heritage, their physical connection with Abraham, and they think that that makes them special, that really is the saving grace that will protect them from anything else, from their sins. If I might be so bold, I get the sense sometimes that's still true. That today you do find people who, if they claim a Jewish heritage, they think somehow that connection with the flesh still makes them God's special people, and it's really not a matter of being concerned about hell or about sin. It's just, we're God's people. If there is a religious aspect, it seems to be wrapped up still in that pride of the flesh. It's something that they have to overcome in order to reach Christ, certainly. It was a stumbling block for these people. And certainly it was a harsh message when Jesus told them, he said, look, you follow your father as I follow my father. You follow your father. And they said, Abraham is our father. I'm reading now John 8:39. John 8:39, they answered and said, Abraham is our father. And Jesus said, if you were Abraham's children, you would do the works of Abraham. But now you seek to kill me, a man that had told you the truth, which I have heard of God. This did not Abraham. You do the works of your father. He said, we're not born of fornication. We have one Father, even God. I wonder again whether or not there may be some sort of a dig there. Jesus was said to be born of a virgin. Of course, we know he was. But you can imagine, as that became known, a lot of rather harsh and unkind things might have been said. But they claim here, we're not born of fornication. And we're not born of idolatry. We have one Father, one God. Jesus says again, verse 42, your life shows the lie. If God were your Father, you would love me. For I proceeded forth and came from my Father. Neither came I of myself, but he sent me. We've been emphasizing this point as well. When Jesus talks about being sent, the Hebrew writer, you remember, talks about Jesus being the apostle and high priest of our faith. I think that's what the Hebrew writer is talking about. What does the word apostle mean? But one sent. And Jesus is one sent. Now, he sent out his apostles, but who sent out Jesus? Where did he send him? Where did he send him? To the earth. And so that can't be said about any of us. We were sent to the earth. Rather, it really speaks again to his special natures. He said, I am from above. If God were your Father, you would love me. I proceed from him. He sent me, verse 43. Why do you not understand my speech? Because you cannot hear my words. What Jesus is lamenting is the fact that they were hard-hearted and stubborn, and they could not hear. They were wayside soil. They had made themselves so. What was it that Jesus had told them back in chapter 7 as we divide the story? If any man will to do his will, he'll understand. He'll know the teaching, whether I'm of God. But these are folks who, again, it's a matter of will. The Calvinist is not right. It's not predetermined, and we're just running in this maze like a rat in an experiment. That's not the truth. We have the choice. But you can make the choice to harden your heart. You can say no to God enough to where you can't hear him anymore. Where you have no conscience. It is, as Paul would like to say, seared like a hot iron. And that's where these folks are. And they stand, I think, as a warning to us. Ye are of your father the devil. And the lust of your, verse 44, the lust of your father ye will do. He was a murderer from the beginning and abode not the truth, because there is no truth in him. When he speaks a lie, he speaks of his own. He is a liar and the father of it. You're as hard-hearted as the devil is. You're totally devoted to your father, and he's totally devoted to rebellion against God. There's no hope of redeeming the devil. There's no plan to save him. As far as Jesus is concerned, these folks have put themselves in that same camp. And because I tell you, verse 45, I tell you the truth, you believe me not. Which of you convinceth me of sin? And if I say the truth, why do you not believe me? You can't convict me of one sin, and yet you oppose me. So what does that say about you? Good question. He that is of God heareth God's words, verse 47. Ye therefore hear them not, because ye are not of God. And that's when the Jews answered and said, say we well that you're a Samaritan and have a devil. Those were just insults, weren't they? They didn't really think he was a Samaritan. But they certainly maybe thought he was less a Jew than they were. And it was just, again, it was just insulting. It was just scornful. You have a demon. They did accuse him of working in league with the devil, but I don't know that they literally thought he was demon-possessed. But they just were scornful of him. And Jesus said, I don't have a devil. I honor my Father. You do dishonor me. So where does that put them in reference to God? And I seek not mine own glory. There is one that seeketh and judgeth. Verily, verily, I say to you, if any man keep my saying, he shall never see death. The Lord here does not let up. You think that he didn't know how they would react to that statement, but he told them the truth. He said, what I'm talking about is life. What I'm offering is freedom from death. And you can just imagine, if you had read the story, you could imagine what they would have said next. You have a question to point through verse 51. All right, then, let's see. Verse 52, then said the Jews unto him, now we know that you have a devil. Abraham is dead. The prophets, thou sayest, if man keep my saying, he shall never taste death. What are you talking about? You're crazy. And they said, art thou greater than our father Abraham, which is dead? And the prophets and thou, let's see, art thou greater than our father Abraham, which is dead, and the prophets are dead? Whom makest thou thyself? Who do you think you are? Jesus answered, if I honor myself, my honor is nothing. It is my Father that honoreth me, of whom ye say that he is your God. And yet ye have not known him, but I have known him. And if I should say I know him not, I should be a liar like you. But I know him, and keep his sayings. Your father Abraham rejoiced to see my day. He saw it and was glad. And you can imagine how that would flow. Even without reading the story. But Jesus is saying here, I submitted myself to the will of my Father. Jesus thought it not robbery to be equal with God. But in his sonship, he became dependent on his Father and followed exclusively the will of his Father. He submitted himself to the Father to become a son of God, to become like us, and to show us how children of God behave. So all of this, I think, is why he came. But it's absurd for them to talk about how they know God and he doesn't. Well, he is the ultimate expression of God. He is the Word of God. Yes, sir.
Wes, where he says here, your father Abraham rejoiced to see my day, and he saw it and was glad.
Yeah.
You know, Abraham's been dead some hundreds of years at this point. And, you know, he was given all nations be blessed through him. And it's like something Abraham knows that somehow or another in the spiritual realm that we're not made aware of. He says he knows that he saw this day. So even though he's been dead, he knows it.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm making that clear. But
No, I do. I think it's important to discuss. What does he mean when he says that? Abraham saw my day and was glad. Yes, sir.
Could it be in Hebrews 11? It says, these all died in faith, not having received the promises, but having seen them afar off, were assured.
Yeah, there's the question. One or two ways in which I think this generally is taken. One is that Abraham saw it with the assurance of faith in a sense, in a prophetic sense. That he saw these things. That this is what Abraham knew, believed in, and was sure of. And another might be that in some sense he is aware of it, even as it took place. And I guess somebody might say both are true. But certainly Abraham did see this prophetically. I believe that's so. And I believe also Abraham is certainly alive, conscious. And so it's not impossible for me to think that the latter could be true. Yes, sir.
We think about the transfiguration and how Moses and Elijah were standing there talking.
Right.
So we know that there is some awareness in the spiritual realm about what was going on with Jesus at that time.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you said, not just awareness. I don't believe the Bible teaches soul sleeping. I don't believe that's true. I think there was an awareness, and obviously those men were privileged to stand with the Lord, so that would be clearly an awareness of his work and presence on the earth. Yes, sir.
But even the devils knew Jesus, some of his coming. You can see that when they say the brief conversation with him. You would have to think there's different possibility the righteous knowing.
Right. Yeah, they were allowed for a time and for God's purpose to be on the earth with Jesus. And so they would certainly recognize him who he was. Yes, sir.
I think of David, how God revealed to him, David, by faith, David, God telling him certain things. David, rejoiced in his day. And I'm sure Abraham, the same thing, that God revealed certain things to him that, he by faith, he understood how blessed he was, that he was the beginning, if you will, in a sense.
Yeah. Very good. I just have a thought about that. So, but of course, when he said that, when he talked about Abraham, knowing about him, verse 57, the Jews said, "You're not 50 years old. And hast thou seen Abraham?" He said, "Verily, verily, I say to you, before Abraham was, I am." Famous passage there. And it goes back to this idea of the I am. except you believe that I am, you shall die in your sin. But that tense, that expression was one that they surely would not have missed. Verse 59, no, that's not the one I'm looking for. I had it there, I'm sorry. Verse 59, they took up stones to cast at him. They would have recognized what he was saying as blasphemy. By the way, it was blasphemy if Jesus is not God. If Jesus is not God, then they would have been right. If I got out on public square and started talking about how I am the great I am, well, that would be pure blasphemy. It was not with Christ, it was true. They took up stones to stone him, and Jesus hid himself and went out of the temple, going through the midst of them, and so passed by. In the first place, this was not the first or the last time that they took up stones to stone him. That's why the Lord had been away from Jerusalem for the time he had. Because things are very heated here. And their violence and their lawlessness, we've said many times, and it's certainly true, when people reach the point that they believe any means necessary to advance their cause is justified. When a fellow believes that my cause is so righteous that anything that I may do to advance it is justified, now that's a dangerous thing. We see a lot of that in the world. And that's where these guys are. If I am correct about the first part of the chapters we talked about last time, I think they used this poor woman here, set her up. I don't justify her or let her off the hook, but I'm just saying that here's a woman who was taken in adultery, and all of that seems awfully convenient. You know, anything that we have to do to bring him down is justified. Now that is a dangerous place to be. So it is here. They take up stones to stone him. But notice how, and we'll get your comments, let me just make this one more point. Notice how in the last part of this verse, they were not successful. Why? Why were they not able to take him? Wasn't his time, but how did he escape?
Miraculously.
Miraculously?
I think
He hid himself and went out of the temple, passing through the midst of them. You sure he wasn't just a ninja? That's why one fellow I read, you know, I thought, you got to be kidding. They talk about how he was just really clever. And I said, oh, wait a minute, how can you read that way? In Luke 4, you know, we've seen this before, haven't we? We've seen it several times. Earlier, Luke 4 and latter part of 4, where he talks about, he's in the synagogue and they're angry with what he's taught, and they're filled with wrath. Verse 28, they rose up to thrust him out of the city, and they led him to the brow of the temple. Brow of the hill, I'm sorry. The city was built upon, that they might cast him down headlong, and he passed through the midst of them. How do you do that? What do you lose a guy? You got this mob here, and everybody's got their hands on him, and suddenly he's not there. This is just coincidence? Of course not. Of course not. That's why, to me, it's not a strange thing when you read about the men on the road to Emmaus. They don't recognize it. Probably not the first time that's happened. So I think that's something that it is, I think, a miraculous thing. But the Lord, he knew the time, and not before the time would he be taken and killed. Now, please, let me get your questions before. Yes, sir.
I wonder sometimes, I don't really think these Jews are completely honest, you know. They were without excuse.
Yeah.
You know, God sent prophets to them. What they do? They killed them. And Jesus, you know, he makes mention of that. And all the Old Testament prophesied, one is coming, someone's coming, someone's coming. They should have known that. They were the one of the law. And then the miracles. Even Nicodemus was one of the weeks. He said, we know that no man can do this unless God is with him. Nicodemus recognized he had I believe he had an honest heart. God himself said, this is my beloved son, hear ye him. And, you know, even all the way up, when you come to get him in the corner, when Peter tried to cut the ear off, you know, well, probably take the head off, he just got his ear, you know, he heals it. And all the miracles, there's nothing, none of that means nothing to them. They are so determined to kill him, like you mentioned, it didn't matter what it took to get him. And what he said or what he done didn't mean nothing.
And I
But they were without excuse.
No, that's right, and it's also, again, one of those great reminders, when Abraham is pictured speaking to the formerly rich man, if they won't hear Moses and the prophets, they won't hear one raised from the dead. I think if the Lord came to Woodstock tomorrow and began teaching in the streets down here, there'd be a lot of excitement. Within 3 years, they'd be looking to kill him. I don't think anything has changed. I don't think people have changed. You're not going to tell me what to do. I tell you right now, you're not going to tell me what to do. And they say that to the Lord's face. So, yes, sir, you're exactly right.
They pride themselves on Abraham, what they did Moses. We're dear Moses. Moses spoke to me. How come you don't know?
We're going to read that.
They still didn't. It didn't matter.
But you make a very good point. But here's the point is, of course, we all agree with this. I have that excuse too.
Oh, yeah, that's exactly, we all are.
That's exactly right. That's a good point. Thank you. Somebody else had a thought question. Yes, sir.
You know, you talk about they're willing to do anything to catch him. And I'm not trying to accuse someone of it, but the reason that they don't have the male adulterer in the situation, because it could have been one of them.
That's the point. Yes, sir.
You know, we're willing to do anything. The sky is red, and I don't care what you tell me, the sky is red.
Yeah.
You know, they're determined.
Yeah, I think at least that's a strong possibility to me. I've always, it's just too much of it sounds like a setup. But when Jesus said, which you know, he that is without sin among you, I think he's talking about that sin. You guys are just as guilty as this adulterous woman is. You've all got guilt in this. Yes, sir. Good point. All right. Yes, sir.
You know, kind of to piggyback off Brother Rodney, the signs that he put up, they were still trying to stone him, trying to kill him, trying to accuse him of this and that. But the miracle that he did, and they done it again, every chance they got, they tried to stone him. And they even said themselves, how is it that this guy has no learning, no teaching, and can speak the way that he does?
Right.
And they still were unbelievers, and they didn't believe him. And they, you know, like he said, they knew Moses, they didn't know his teaching, or they would have listened to the Lord.
When you get to the point where you can't deny the miracle and you begin to attribute it to the devil, then no wonder the Lord would say, you just can't be forgiven. You just can't be forgiven. You'll be gone. Yes,
They
sir.
made that choice, yeah, they made that choice.
Yes, sir. I believe they did. Yes, sir.
But yeah, I agree that he probably would have been denied today too, but he did make the point that Sodom, who we consider evil, you know, they would have repented if they saw the works that he had done. There is that fact that they would have actually repented.
Yes. That's that must have tasted good. When the Lord said, you know, Sodom, you guys are right below them. That's what he was saying. But yes.
I think about what Paul said over in Acts, when he told him, he said, you have judged yourself unworthy of eternal life. Now you find that. You've judged yourself unworthy.
And I think that though our Calvinist friends think they really find a lot of help for their doctrine in these passages, I'm convinced they don't. It's all about choice. Let's look at chapter 9, for example. Jesus passed by and he saw a man blind from birth, and the disciples asked him, and they said, Master, who did sin, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? What a curious question. One that puzzles people through the years. All kinds of answers have been suggested to their question or related to their question. How can a fellow be born blind and yet it be a consequence of his sin? Now, again, my Calvinist friend says, I see he was born in sin. No, he's talking about his sin, not Adam's sin. So that doesn't really help out the Calvinist either. It is a confused question to my mind. The two possibilities that have been offered through the years, one, and I think Brother McGarvey in his book suggests this, that they were under the spell of some of these transmigration of the soul ideas that were floating around among some of the Jews, that actually in some previous life that they've been, I don't believe that's true. I'm not saying that not some folks have had that kind of screwball idea, that people still do, but I don't think that sure the disciples weren't that silly. Another possibility might be that it was he was born blind because of his sin in prospect, somehow. But that still doesn't really make sense. I just think it was a confused question. The Lord's answer is not a confused answer. But it's also powerful. There's got to be sin, what they're saying, somewhere in this picture. Somehow his or some of his parents, or who was the sinner that caused this? And the Lord's answer, by the way, that sounds awful familiar, having studied Job, doesn't it? That sinners suffer. So if you have a sufferer, you have a sinner. Now that syllogism's got a problem. That's a false syllogism, but that's maybe what we're going to call a syllogism, more than a syllogism. That's not true. But they seem to be infected by some of that same thinking. So anyway, Jesus said, it's not sin that's caused this. Not this man's sin, not his parents' sin, but that the works of God should be manifested in him. I guess in the broadest sense of the term, could we say that sin is responsible for suffering? I think we can. I think it was the sin of our parents in the garden that opened the gate for all suffering on earth. So yeah, I think that, but that's not what we're talking about here. What we're talking about is the idea of if I suffer, my guilt has to be tied to that. And Jesus said, no, in this case, it was allowed by God for good to take place. And I think there's a lesson there as well. Why does God allow the suffering that he allows? He allows it, I think, that good might take place. It doesn't mean everything that happens is good. But as Paul would later talk about, God's providence, all things work together for good, for them that love God. Question and point you have about those three verses? Yes?
They should have known what Ezekiel talked about, who was responsible for sin. It's each person. Just the son and the sins are not, the father's not responsible for children's sin, and the children are not responsible for the father's sin.
Yeah, I think the Lord had made that plain. They would have been aware of the book of Job too, wouldn't they? But, these were people. And they sometimes said things and did things that we could relate to because they were so mistaken. But they were great men because they grew and because their heart was dedicated. Got a question for you? Yes, sir.
Well, even when Jesus was ready to be killed and go back to heaven, he said, there's many things I want to tell you, but you can't share them now. So there was things that they had to learn later.
Right. And it took the great apostle Peter a while to figure out about the Gentiles, but I'm sure I could have done it as well. And I certainly admire his courage. So Jesus answers them that you just all found up when you're thinking about that. It's not that this man has sinned or his parents sinned, but God has a work to work here. Then he adds this, I must work the works of him that sent me while it's day. Night comes when no man can work. It's a great principle there as well. And what that says about Jesus is that he came, he had a time frame in which to accomplish the work that was to be done. And if that's true about the Lord, it's certainly true about me, isn't it? I must work the works of him while it's day. The Lord didn't send me. But he does call us So if we change that word, we can apply it to ourselves. I must work the works of him that called me while it's day. The night comes when no man can work. As long as I'm in the world, I am the light of the world. I'm here to be a light the whole time I'm here. And in some sense, in a lesser sense, but a no less true sense, you and I are too. We're the reflected light. When he had thus spoken, he spat upon the ground, made clay of the spittle, and anointed the eyes of the blind man with clay. And people have asked the question, why did he do that? I don't know, he didn't explain why he did that. I'm sure it wasn't the mud that he made that healed him. It was associated with the miracle. It was, I think, maybe a reminder to the man. It was certainly a symbol of that which is decay is the wrong word. Anyway, debris or something of that nature that would be cleared away. And so he said, I put this mud on here, and I tell you to go to Siloam and wash it off. And it was a test of the man's faith, whether or not he would do that and receive this blessing. But the man made his choice. He went his way and washed and came seeing. Notice here another example of the many hundreds in the Bible, I guess we could say, of a conditional gift. This man went as he was told, washed as he was told. Did he earn anything by doing that? What did he earn by doing that? Could he say, I'm seeing that. I never have seen before. I've seen that. You should have seen me wash. Oh man, it was marvelous. No, that's not something to brag about. Was it necessary? What if he had just sat back and said, I just believe God can heal me right here, sitting right here. I don't have to go to anywhere. Would he have been healed? I think there's no reason to believe he would have been healed. So here's a gift. God says, I want to give you this gift. But it's a condition. The whole notion that's taken over the Protestant world that obeying the conditions of God is works salvation. That's a bizarre concept to me, and just false as it can be. There's a world of difference in talking about earning our way with God or simply meeting the conditions that he sets upon his grace. And here's another great example of that. Here's a man who was given a great gift, sight. He did not earn anything. And yet to come along and say, you don't do anything to receive this gift, is in complete contradiction of what the Lord himself told me. Here are the things you must do to receive the gift. Now you got a question for me?
Yes, sir. That reminds me when the commander of the army came to see Elijah. He said he had the legions on him, and Elijah told him to go rinse, go dip yourself in the Jordan.
Right.
And he walked away upset. All these beautiful rivers out there, and you want me to go to? And his servant said, go do it. This servant had more faith than he did. He said, go do it. And when he did, he found out that was truly the God, no one's better than the God of Israel.
And Rahab the harlot be another example. And many other examples in the scriptures, as James talks about, faith without works is dead. This is the kind of works we're talking about. Not earning something, but rather meeting the conditions of God's grace. And by the way, it did take some faith. You talk about faith in action. You've probably seen models like this before. But, here's the Temple Mount. Again, pictured, this would be from the south side, wouldn't it? And then some of the old city of Jerusalem down here, city of David. And here is the Pool of Siloam in this model. And so, I don't know exactly where he was when Jesus encountered him. Somewhere around the temple, but he would have had to make his way down there. Should have had some help. But his mindset was, I believe this man. And I believe if I do what he says, I'll get what he promises. And so, that's what he did. Siloam, by the way, means sent. And just as an aside, I think that probably that has to do with how that through the work of Solomon, or Hezekiah, I should say, this Gihon spring was diverted, or part of it, into the pool of Siloam. And so the water was sent through these channels by the work of the Israelites. And what a glorious thing it was for them, a blessing it was through the years as they were attacked. So he sent him to pool sent. And so he does. He goes, he washes, and for the first time in his life he sees. And we can imagine the joy and the amazement and all the rest that came from that. Now, in verse 8, the neighbors, therefore, and they which before had seen him that was blind, they said, Is this not he that sat and begged? Some said, It's he. Others said, It's like him. He said, I'm he. And they said, How? How did this happen? And he said, A man that is called Jesus made clay and anointed my eyes and said to me, Go to the pool of Siloam and wash. And I went and washed and received my sight. And they said, Where is he? And he said, I don't know. He couldn't see when he encountered him. And he had gone to Siloam. He wasn't sure where Jesus was. It's interesting, too, as you read this story, isn't it? That you have the growing faith of this man. And how, in his descriptions, in the first place, how does he describe the Lord?
This man named Jesus.
This man named Jesus.
He
Yeah, this man named Jesus. He knew enough about him, I guess, to believe him, but I'm sure his faith grows as he's opposed, it seems to me. He becomes more bold, doesn't he? As he is challenged. The neighbors want to know, what is this about? So they take him off to the Pharisees in verse 13. And the Pharisees encountered this man that was afore blind. It was the Sabbath day when Jesus had made the clay and opened his eyes. Then again, the Pharisees also asked him how he received his sight. This is the first time they asked. And he said, He put clay on my eyes, and I washed, and I do see. And therefore, said some of the Pharisees, this man is not of God, because he keeps not the Sabbath. How about that? Others said, How can a man that is a sinner do miracles? And there was a division among them. And they said to the blind man again, they said, What sayest thou of he that opened thine eyes? He said, He's a prophet. We're getting more bold now in our speech. The Jews did not believe concerning him that had been blind, and so they said, This is some kind of hoax. It's some kind of put-up job. Call his parents in here. You know, I think when I read that, I think you talk about a hoax. Takes one to know one. Reminds me of chapter 8 and verse 1. Anyway, but they said, Call his parents in here. So they do. And is this your son? Or somebody else? Our son. You tell us he was born blind. He was born blind. Well, how's he see? I don't know. Better ask him. We know this is our son. He was born blind, but by what means he seeth, we do not know. Get on the right passage. We do not know who has opened his eyes. He's of age. Ask him. He can speak for himself. The reason they said that is because the Jews had agreed already. I'm sure probably in a more informal way. I don't know that they had a formal decision about this. That if any man did not confess that he was Christ, if any man did confess that he was Christ, he would be put out of the synagogue. Now that kind of excommunication would be very pleasant. As a Jew, tied to the community, to be treated like a heathen would certainly be a powerful and unpleasant punishment. So that's why his parents said, he's of age, ask him. So, again, they call him back. You have a question up to this point?
I don't have an observation, something similar. You know, they went to the Jews, went to the Pharisees. I wonder why. And I was thinking, years ago, I was studying this guy, trying to teach him, and, I guess it was new to his ears, and he went to the preacher, his preacher. And so, he comes back telling me, you know, thought I had him to meet, but once he talked to his preacher,
Right.
and all that was done. So, well, my preacher said, I ain't, you know. So, you know, he went to the Pharisees, they go to the preacher, he goes to the preacher.
Good point. Yes, sir.
You know, nowadays, there's a lot of, people out there that, you know, when Christians talk to them, their preachers are telling them, no, don't talk to those people. You need to stay away from those people. You know, you tell somebody you're a member of the church, they say, oh, we know about y'all, we go the other way. They don't want to have anything to do with us. Because, you know, they want, a lot of times they want to change it and adapt it to their surroundings and make this and that, for everybody, make everybody else happy instead of, you know, preaching what the word says. They try to change it around to make everybody happy, so, no, we'll okay, y'all stay over there.
Well, we're gonna have to stop there. Thank you very much for all your help and your participation today. We'll plan to pick up